I loved Lucas for 7 years. When I was kidnapped, Lucas didn't pay the ransom because his female secretary suggested to take this opportunity to make me behave. I endured hellish torture. I finally learned to stay away from Lucas, but he cried and begged me to give him another chance. The day I walked barefoot into the city, I made the news: the Smith's foster daughter, kidnapped for months, wearing tattered clothes, dirty and smelly, with dirty, scarred feet, returned in a sorry state. Like a dog, I watched as the media's flashes rushed towards me, trying to capture every moment, but my heart was already as still as dead water, unable to stir up even a ripple. The former Shirley died, the glamorous, innocent, and carefree Shirley died, destroyed by those kidnappers, and by Lucas. Soon, a group of bodyguards in black suits opened up a path through the bustling crowd. The leader was called Eason, and I knew him. He was the one who would invite me out of Lucas's office and private apartment. During the 7 years I was entangled with Lucas, he always invited me, but it was more like dragging me, because I kept pestering and annoying Lucas to his limits. "Shirley, Lucas is waiting for you in the car. Please come with me," Eason said. When Eason's gaze fell on me, he was momentarily surprised. He obviously didn't expect to see me in such a miserable state. I nodded and took a step with my injured foot, leaving bloodstains along the way. My nerves were already numb. This short journey was nothing compared to my escape. As we got into the car, I saw Lucas sitting in the seat with his eyes closed, his finely groomed black hair unruly, his perfect facial features impeccable. During my absence, he must have felt an unprecedented sense of tranquility and relaxation. He was in excellent shape. Hearing a sound, Lucas slowly opened his eyes. When he saw me, he almost didn't recognize me. "Shirley?" I obediently nodded. I had learned to behave. I used to not care about being the Smith's foster daughter, considering myself as the Smith's real daughter, proud and willful, but after being kidnapped, I realized that my life was in the Smith's hands. As long as Lucas didn't pay the ransom, my life was worthless. He frowned slightly and seemed displeased. "Why did you make yourself look like this?" "Like this? Which one? A lunatic? A beggar?" I had been on the run for dozens of kilometers, sleepless night and day. In addition to the kidnappers, I had to beware of wild beasts in the outskirts, drink rainwater when thirsty, and scavenge through roadside garbage heaps when hungry. I think anyone would go crazy in such a situation. I knew that he was blaming me for appearing in front of the media in such a state, which would bring trouble to his company, to be precise. The Smith's company. I'm sorry for dirtying Lucas's eyes." Upon hearing my response, Lucas paused for a moment, then smirked. "She's right, you have indeed learned to behave." I didn't understand what Lucas was talking about. As the car door closed and the car started moving, Lucas suddenly reached out his long arm towards me. I instinctively recoiled to the corner, but he stopped abruptly and exclaimed in a disdainful tone, "Shirley, you smell rotten." Perhaps due to the enclosed space in the car, Lucas finally caught a whiff of the unpleasant smell emanating from me, a mixture of blood, sweat, rolling in the mud, scratching in garbage heaps, and fermentation. Upon hearing Lucas's words, I involuntarily left my seat, causing the car to swerve. I ended up kneeling in the aisle. I'm sorry, I won't dirty the seat. I just need to kneel here." It was painful. My knees, along with the blood holes the kidnappers had pierced with fine needles, causing me pain. They found fault with me, and to Lucas, I was of no importance. They didn't get the ransom, wasted their time, so they took it out on me. I couldn't stand up, so I knelt and sat in that cramped space. Lucas was furious. "What are you doing? Get back to your seat." He ordered me, but didn't come to help me up due to the dirt. I had no choice but to obey, using a great deal of effort to prop myself back into my seat. The pain, coupled with days of low blood sugar, made me shed involuntary tears. Lucas would usually ignore my tears. They would only annoy him. However, this time, he unexpectedly threw the handkerchief he had wiped his hands with onto me. I clutched onto the clean white cloth. Previously, I would have been ecstatic, but now, the handkerchief only symbolized my dirtiness and brokenness. I saw Eason glance at me through the rearview mirror. I couldn't bear to look up. Perhaps he had never seen me in such a humiliating state before. The car returned to the Smith's mansion. Lucas ordered someone to take me to the bathroom to freshen up. I refused the maid's help, only allowing them to pick a long dress that didn't reach my ankles from my old wardrobe. They rummaged for a while and finally pulled out a set of modest long-sleeve dress that resembled a student's uniform from various corners of my fashionable closet. No one defined how a student should dress. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, I did seem more like a student than my previous flamboyant dressing style. Before being kidnapped, I received an acceptance letter from a top international design school, and now, 3 months had passed since the enrollment date. "Thank you." The maids were shocked. They didn't expect the young lady to thank them, but after this experience, I realized that fundamentally, I was no different from them. They were hired maids of the Smiths, and I was the Hired daughter of the Smiths. Stepping out of the room, I saw Lucas waiting for me at the staircase. He leaned lazily against the railing, lazily eyeing me up and down, then sneered, "Shirley, what kind of trick are you playing now with this outfit?" Lucas thought it was another childish act of mine to attract his attention, but I just wanted to cover up the bruises on my body. I followed Lucas into the dining room, where silence reigned until Lucas gestured for me to step forward, and only then did I see Lucas's parents sitting at the table, looking worried. Mrs. Smith practically rushed towards me when she saw me, stumbling, supported by another woman. "Aunt, please don't worry, Shirley's back all safe and sound now, right?" "Shirley, Aunt is so worried about you, she's gone gray." I knew this woman. She was Lucas's secretary. Anna had a natural head of black hair and wore the simplest high-neck sweater and jeans, but she adorned her neck with a beautiful rose gold necklace. While I appeared safe and sound, Mrs. Smith was gray with worry. The moment she spoke, I transformed from the victim into the Smith's unfilial daughter. Mrs. Smith clung to me, a woman comforting her nearby, but I couldn't shed tears. I looked at Lucas, whose gaze seemed to accuse me of being heartless. Finally, Mr. Smith sternly interrupted. "Stop clinging to Shirley, let her come and eat. Murray, I'll take care of this, Dad." Lucas called out, perhaps feeling embarrassed in front of Anna. I shook my head without saying a word, overcoming the physical disgust, and used chopsticks to put the beef into my mouth. Unexpectedly, as I tried to swallow it, I spit it out. Lucas looked puzzled, and I immediately stood up from the stool, holding my head and hiding in the corner. I'm sorry, I'll eat it, don't hit me." Everyone was shocked. Mrs. Smith's tears flowed down again as she came over to hug me. "Were you abused by those people? Tell me, were you?" Mr. Smith, with Lucas, also walked over, his expression full of pity as he looked at me. Lucas, on the other hand, frowned and remained silent, his face dark with no mercy. What did this mean? Didn't the kidnapper threaten the Smiths, saying if they didn't pay the ransom, they would let their foster daughter experience bullying? Why ask me now if I had been abused? Actually, being given a piece of spoiled bread or a bowl of rotten rice doesn't count as abuse. After all, what I ate afterwards was like dirty water, but I was so scared of feeling like my life was in Lucas's hands. Despite negotiating with the kidnapper himself, he chose to abandon me. He hated me so much. I think the physical disgust came from this. After dinner, I was called into Mr. Smith's study. Mr. Smith, unlike his usual stern demeanor in the business world, asked me patiently and kindly, "Shirley, you've liked Lucas since you were young. Do you still like him now?" I quickly shook my head vigorously, my face starting to hurt. Liking Lucas for 7 years, being humble for 7 years, suffering for 7 years, but I never learned my lesson, so this time, I experienced revenge and torment like hell. I dare not like Lucas anymore. After hearing my answer, Mr. Smith pondered for a moment and said regretfully, "Alas, let it go. You can't be the Smith's daughter-in-law, but you will always be the Smith's daughter. You are so good, so beautiful. It's Lucas who has no luck." He took out a bank card from the drawer. "This is what your parents left for you. There are 4 million in it. They asked me to keep it and said when you grow up, it will be given to you as a dowry. 4 million, the same as the ransom." During the days of being kidnapped, I also resented my parents. Why didn't they take me with them, letting me suffer for no reason? They had already left behind a guarantee that could allow me to live well. They loved me so much. I bit my thumb and put it in my mouth to prevent myself from crying out, "Thank you, Uncle." Coming out of the study, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. I walked towards my room, but on the way, I met Lucas. Seeing his intention, he spoke to me in a surprisingly gentle tone. "Tonight Anna will stay in your room. You go to the guest room next to mine." It was for Anna. I nodded and started walking in the opposite direction. When I first moved into the Smith's house, Lucas disliked me and moved to the farthest room from me, one to the east and one to the west, but my room was designed by a top luxury designer that the Smiths had hired. The guest room couldn't compare, but, in the end, it was the Smiths' property, so I let go at Lucas's request. Just as I took a few steps, Lucas stopped me. "Shirley, why are you so obedient now?" I turned back and found his expression mocking, yet also worried. "I'm sorry." I hesitated in response. Besides apologizing constantly, I had no idea what to say to Lucas. "This is the 3rd time today that you've apologized to me. You are very strange." Lucas walked over and lowered his head, reaching out his hand towards my forehead. I recoiled as if I had been electrocuted, and when I reached for the railing of the corridor, my legs felt weak, almost unable to stand. Lucas looked at me as if I were crazy, his expression becoming impatient. I struggled to suppress the trembling in my voice and said, I will move out tomorrow. I already told Uncle." I thought Lucas would be relieved to hear this news, but instead, he became angry. "Move out? Why?" "All I did was let Anna stay in your room for a while. She is a guest. What's wrong with you letting her?" I shook my head in a panic. It's not like that. Lucas walked towards me with a dark face, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me towards the room furthest to the east. Come with me, I have something to tell you. Fear flooded my brain, and with a trembling voice, I pulled out the bank card Mr. Smith had given me in the room earlier. I'm sorry. I have money. Don't hit me. I have money. Don't hit me. Lucas turned around in astonishment, and I was already sitting on the floor, my wrists still held high in his hand. Surely, what are you talking about? By now my lips were so purple from biting them, and as I watched Lucas's face gradually magnify, I gradually remembered the insults from the kidnapper, the Smith's little dog, delusional about being with the owner. Lucas, I won't pester you anymore. I won't dare again. Lucas finally realized that my mental state was not quite right. His actions softened considerably as he embraced my waist and lifted me from the ground. The sense of weightlessness caused me to instinctively wrap my arms around Lucas's neck, and his serious expression finally showed a hint of softening. Surely, I'm not stopping you from following me. It's just before he could finish, the door of a room in the corridor opened with a click, and Anna peeked out from my room with the lights on inside. She covered her mouth, looking somewhat surprised. Lucas, surely, Lucas wasn't pleased. You have the room. Is there anything else? Anna replied somewhat aggrieved. There's a video conference with the U.S. branch that you need to attend yourself. Lucas glanced at me in his arms and reluctantly let me go, my body stiff. I couldn't say a word. You go to my room and wait for me. After leaving behind those words, Lucas walked towards Anna, and the two entered the room and closed the door. The bright light vanished from the corridor, and I sat in the guest room, sweating cold, as if surviving a calamity. Lucas wouldn't come back again, because I knew Anna's methods. Countless times, my birthdays, my graduation ceremonies, he was called away by Anna like this. Perhaps he really wanted to leave, and really didn't want to come back, and I had to leave as soon as possible. To a place where I couldn't see Lucas. I was afraid that any contact with Lucas would drive me crazy and make me mentally collapse. I sat on the bed in the guest room until 3 in the morning, and there was no noise coming from Lucas's room next door. During this time, I used the phone. Mrs. Smith had recently bought me to find an apartment with good security that was available for rent, just as the day was dawning. The Smiths' residence was silent. I left my shoes behind and went out. Barefoot, once outside, I suddenly saw a person leaning against Lucas's car, playing with a phone. My heart leaped with fear, afraid that person was Lucas. The person heard the noise, looked at me, and then I realized it was Ethan. I pretended nothing happened, stepped past him, and prepared to hail a taxi by the side of the road, but he followed. Surely? Does Lucas know you're leaving? Can you not tell Lucas? I tried to contain my excitement because I was so close to escaping. So why did I have to run into him? Ethan was puzzled. Lucas would worry. I vigorously shook my head. I started to undress. Ethan hurriedly stepped back and then turned his head away, his ears turning red. Surely, what are you doing? I didn't care. What was shame when survival was at stake? Those things had long been worn away by Lucas. He wouldn't be worried about me, as all these scars were left on me by instructions from him and the kidnappers. At that moment, Ethan looked back at me. Under my coat was a white sleeveless vest that clearly revealed the purple whip marks, bruises, and a few scab scars on my arms. He couldn't believe it. These horrifying scars were beyond his comprehension. Taking advantage of his momentary stupefaction, I quickly dressed back up, pleading, Ethan, please, let me go, or I will die. This was the first time I called him by his name. Before, I had always called him Lucas's dog, just like those kidnappers called me. Ethan couldn't speak for a while. I hurriedly ran to the roadside to hail a taxi. Suddenly, a big hand grabbed me, judged the condition of bruises under my clothes, and then recoiled. I was on the verge of tears. Don't. Seeing him grit his teeth, I begged, Ethan, please, let me go, or I will die. This was the first time I called him by his name. Unable to resist further, and as a last resort, I ran out of the house barefoot. After coming outside, I suddenly saw a person leaning against Lucas's car next to Ethan, playing with a phone. My heart was filled with fear, afraid that person was Lucas. The person heard the movement and turned to look at me. I realized it was Ethan. I pretended nothing happened and walked past him, but he followed. Surely? Does Lucas know that you're leaving? Can you not tell Lucas? I tried to contain my excitement, as I was so close to escaping. So why did I have to run into him? Ethan was puzzled. Lucas would worry. I shook my head vigorously. I started to undress. Ethan hurriedly stepped back and then turned his head away, his ears turning red. Surely, what are you doing? I didn't care. What was shame when survival was at stake? Those things had long been worn away by Lucas. He wouldn't be worried about me, as all these scars were left on me by instructions from him and the kidnappers. Ethan turned back towards me, seeing the horrifying scars and bruises on my arms. He couldn't comprehend it. Seizing the moment, I quickly got dressed again and begged, Ethan, please, let me go, or I will die. This was the first time I called him by his name. As before, I had always called him Lucas's dog, Just like those kidnappers called me, Ethan was speechless for a moment. I quickly ran towards the roadside to hail a taxi, and suddenly, a large hand grabbed me, which then recoiled upon judging the bruises under my clothes. At the edge of tears, I implored, "Please don't hurt me, let me go." Noticing the distress on my face, Ethan gritted his teeth and firmly said, "I won't let you go. I'll take you, 120 square meters. It's already the largest apartment in our community. Whether you live alone or with your boyfriend, there is plenty of space." I looked at Ethan, who remained silent, flipping through the contract in his hand. After asking about utilities like water and electricity and ensuring everything was in order, he handed the contract to me. I don't know why, but I trust him a lot. Maybe it's because every time he pulled me out of Lucas's office, I didn't mind his good temperament despite my punches and kicks. Or maybe it's because he followed Lucas's instructions to find me at the bar and beat up the men who tried to harm me. Without hesitation, I quickly signed the contract, took out my bank card, and handed it to the agent. After he swiped it on the POS machine, he complimented me and Ethan before happily leaving. In the spacious room, only Ethan and I were left. He suddenly seemed a bit awkward. "Surely, I should go back," he said. I nodded, intending to write him a check as a thank you, but I realized my pockets were empty. I had left everything behind and only planned to bring a few pieces of clothing. I didn't even think about my own room being taken over, let alone having a checkbook. "Ethan, how can I thank you?" Ethan looked slightly surprised and said, "No, there's no need to thank me." He didn't say anything more. Even if he needed me to thank him later, I wouldn't refuse. Ethan left, saying he needed to go back to work. Before leaving, he said, "Rest well." I naturally needed to rest. I even thought to myself, I can finally rest now, after sleeping in shelters in the countryside and being on high alert for danger. I arrived back at the Smiths. I was always waiting for an opportunity to escape, so when I sat on the soft bed in the guest room, I pinched the soft flesh on my thigh repeatedly to stay awake. I took off my shoes and walked into the bedroom upstairs. There was only a bare mattress on the bed. I hadn't had time to buy any household items. Fortunately, the loft came with blackout curtains. I pulled the curtain shut, lay on the mattress, and fell into a deep sleep. When my consciousness returned, I heard knocking on the door echoing through the room and hallway. Still groggy from my long sleep, I didn't move from the bed until the sound of the door lock hitting the floor brought me back to reality. Who was it? A kidnapper? Lucas? I quickly searched for something in the room that could be used for self-defense, but found nothing. I went downstairs, feeling anxious. When I reached the last few steps, I stumbled and fell. "Shirley." A clear voice called out. I looked up to see Ethan standing outside my door, panting and looking concerned. He rushed over to help me up, and I was too stunned to speak. Finally, Ethan helped me up to the wash basin to rinse my mouth. Ethan looked at me, still wearing my long dress. Ethan inquired, "How long have you been sleeping?" I thought for a moment and replied, "About 2 hours." He was surprised and said, "Think again. It's been 2 days since you signed the contract." 2 days? I was astonished. Ethan was now in casual clothes, but I remembered him wearing a suit that morning. I had not eaten or drunk anything and had slept for 2 days and nights. Ethan realized the situation and touched the table. Indeed, there was a layer of dust. He took off his black jacket, shaking off the dust, which filled the air. "Sit here," he commanded. I didn't know what he was planning, so I walked over and sat on his jacket. He rolled up his sleeves and went into the bathroom, making a considerable racket. After cleaning, Ethan handed me a glass of water and said, "Rest a bit, and once I'm done, I'll take you out to eat. We will go eat shabu shabu, all right?" I overheard the girls talking about how delicious it is. Ethan suggested. I was feeling hungry after sleeping for so long, especially since I hadn't eaten much at the Smiths and had ended up throwing it up. Just as we were about to leave, I was hit with a sharp pain in my stomach. I rushed to the bathroom to vomit, only bringing up brownish blood as my stomach was empty. Seeing me in distress, Ethan held my shoulders. "Feeling helpless, Shirley?" he said softly, leading me to the sink to rinse my mouth. Ethan sat beside my bed, his brow furrowed as he looked through my medical records. Due to my condition, I was only allowed to drink congee and eat liquid food. I could tell I was starting to feel a bit better thanks to Ethan's care and his excellent cooking skills. Eventually, I tried to sneak a third bowl of cashew nut congee, but Ethan caught me in the act and playfully scolded me. He then insisted on taking care of the dishes, urging me to relax on the couch while he cleaned up. As days passed, with Ethan's attentive and caring nature, my health began to improve. He prepared delicious meals and ensured I followed the doctor's orders for recovery. When the doctor gave me the go-ahead to eat regular meals again, I was overjoyed, and it was Ethan who stood by me, supporting my journey to wellness. Ethan's indulgent expression released me, patted my back, and shooed me to the sofa. Then he busied himself in the kitchen. I sat on the sofa, playing with the bank card my parents left me, besides the money inside. It was also a keepsake. Suddenly I felt like a blessed child. Their love had never left me, even before the accident. They were Still planning my future for me, Eason, he was like a gift from them to me. I put away the bank card. Since it was part of my dowry, I had to keep it safe. The news was playing on TV. After a music segment, I suddenly saw a glaring headline. Smith's group's heiress was kidnapped, walked barefoot back to the city, looking mad and different from her usual self. I turned off the TV, my breathing became rapid. I silently told myself, it was all in the past, I would never see those people again. Never see Lucas again. After calming down, my heart rate finally returned to normal, then the doorbell rang. I figured it must be Eason ordering some delivery again. After all, since I moved in, the entire loft was designed and decorated by him. Without much thought, I got up to open the door, but outside, I saw the person I didn't want to see. Anna was carrying several bags of fruits, and as soon as she saw me, she smiled brightly. Shirley, I heard you were in the hospital recently. I came specially to visit you. I coldly questioned, how did you know? Anna thought for a moment and put on an innocent look. Lucas told me. Of course, my heart pounded. How did Lucas know? Was he monitoring me? If Anna knows my home address, does that mean he knows too? Is he coming to find me? Get out. I struggled to get out a sentence, wanting to close the door, but Anna pushed back. After being scolded, she finally dropped the pretense and her eyes turned malicious. Shirley, Lucas already knows your home address. You better move quickly. Don't shamelessly stick to him. I won't, Anna snorted. Won't? The kidnappers beat you pretty badly, right? I heard they used sticks, whips, and even the curling iron you had in your bag, burned into your skin. Must have been painful, right? They gave you rotten food, even dogs wouldn't eat, but you ate it. My pupils contracted sharply, almost unable to stand steady. The last thing I wanted to remember was being torn open by Anna. How do you know? Anna looked smug. It was my idea to have Lucas delay the ransom payment, to make you suffer, because you are an arrogant and pampered little miss, don't know your place, always clinging to him. So, I hinted to those kidnappers, the more they hurt you, the quicker the money would arrive. I was on the brink of collapse. Why? Why did she do this? Why did Lucas do this? In my mind, the last strand of reason snapped, and like a madwoman, I grabbed Anna, wanting to bite her, to fall down the stairs together and perish. At this moment, Eason heard the commotion in the room and ran to the doorway. Surely, I couldn't hear any sound around me. I only had one thought, to kill Anna. Eason forcibly separated us, embracing me. I couldn't stop crying. He pushed Anna away when she tried to approach again. Without any mercy, Anna hit the banister on the stairs, too hurt to stand up. What are you two doing? A stern voice interrupted us. Lucas, still impeccably dressed, entered calmly, a stark contrast to every single moment of my despair. I was so pathetic. After Lucas went upstairs and saw me clinging to Eason, his face grew even darker. He turned and helped Anna up. Lucas, I just wanted to visit Shirley. Who would have thought Shirley wouldn't appreciate it, and even came up to hit me. Perhaps because I found out he was cohabiting with Eason. Cohabit? Lucas's anger surged. Eason didn't speak, just kept holding me, patting my shoulder repeatedly. After seeing my emotions stabilize a bit, he tried to take me back to the room, but was blocked by Lucas. Shirley, don't make a scene, come home with me. His tone carried an order. Lucas still thought it was me causing a scene. He wanted to pull me out of Eason's embrace, but was pushed back by Eason. Lucas, this is Shirley's home. Shirley? Calling her so affectionately, is that why you quit your job? Eason quit his job? I raised my head, but could only see his sharply defined jawline. As the two sides were at a standstill, Anna suddenly cried out in pain, Mr. Lucas, I'm in pain. Lucas glanced at me, then at Anna, and ultimately lifted Anna up and left, leaving behind a phrase, Shirley, I'll give you one more chance. If you don't come home this time, then you never have to come back. I was trembling with fear. Eason whispered in my ear, don't be afraid, I'm here. After that commotion caused by Anna, I decided to move. My original intention was to ensure Lucas would never find me again, but every move I made seemed to still be under his watchful eye. Eason was unwavering in his support of me, but there was no suitable housing available at the moment. How about going to my place for now? As Lucas was already aware of this address, Eason was afraid Lucas might come looking for me when he wasn't around. Your place? I questioned. Eason blushed as usual, but he had made some progress. At least he dared to look me in the eyes in such a situation. Yeah, don't think too much. My place has 2 bedrooms, it's enough space, but we can't keep living in 2 bedrooms forever. In my home, it was like this. In his home, it was also the same. When would Anna's accusation of cohabitation be confirmed? Eason's eyes widened slightly, as if I had said something outrageous. I didn't blush. My heart didn't race, teasing him about this matter was indeed easy. Surely, I took out the bank card my parents had left me and said to Eason very seriously, "Eason, as you know, I'm the Smiths' adopted daughter, a plaything they can discard at any time, but I still have genuine feelings, although mostly tainted, but there's a little bit left that is pure. Would you be willing to accept that little bit of genuine feeling?" Eason's eyes reddened, very carefully. "Surely, your feelings will always be pure, even if it's just a little bit. I wholeheartedly desire it." Touched, I embraced him, and after a while, I remembered to hand him the bank card. "Dowry?" Eason looked puzzled for a moment. Although it was a dowry, it seemed like I was giving him an engagement gift. He chuckled. "Baby, take it back. A dowry should be held in your own hands, so." "A dowry must be held in my own hands." Eason pulled me back into his embrace and whispered in my ear, "The dowry is a dowry, but from now on the money in the house is also yours." Home, I like that word. Thankfully, with not much stuff, Eason packed up all day, and we moved. His house was as clean and tidy as I had imagined. I observed from the entrance of Eason's bedrooms, the scent of citrus wafting in through the half-open window, sweet and fragrant. "What are you standing there for? Come in." Eason patted my head from behind, and I happily threw myself onto his bed, soft and comfortable. Eason laid down next to me. After a day of busyness, he was also a bit tired. "Go to sleep." I shifted my head in the soft pillow, grasping Eason's slightly rough hand, and entered dreamland. When I woke up again, it was already dark. The bedside lamp was on in the bedroom, casting a dim light. But Eason was still working on his laptop. Seeing me wake up, he swiftly closed the computer, pulled out a USB drive, then brought over a bowl of sweet soup from the bedside table. It was still warm. After drinking the soup, I fell back into a deep sleep, and the next day, Eason was nowhere to be found by the bed. For 3 consecutive days, I followed Eason's meal plan on the fridge, taking out the pre-prepared meals from the fridge, but eating tastelessly. I missed Eason a lot, but I didn't know where he had gone. There wasn't a single missed call on my phone, but on the contrary, all were rejected calls, the familiar numbers I used to know by heart. I decided to go out to find him. Even thought of going to the police station to report him missing, but if the police couldn't find the kidnappers who took me, could I trust them? Lost in confusion, I walked out of the house, and by the time I reached the end of the alley, I was suddenly pulled into a car, and when I woke up again, I was in my bed in the room, or rather, it was in the Smiths villa's room. The room was dim, the moonlight was coming through the window, but I saw a figure sitting in the dark, staring at me. I was very scared. I pulled the blanket over me, but the person quickly turned on the light and approached me. "Shirley, I just wanted you to sleep well. I'm sorry. Did I startle you?" His voice felt like a demonic haze. I hesitated to pull down the covers, feeling a chill all over my body. "Mr. Lucas?" Lucas pulled down the blanket, looking a bit hurt. "Shirley, are we really this distant now?" I shook my head, just hoping he would keep his distance from me. My chest was being squeezed and I couldn't breathe. "I'm afraid. I can't do it anymore. I won't cling to Lucas anymore." I remembered the sentence day and night, the one that could spare me a beating. Lucas seemed to be getting emotional, his eyes red, restraining himself. "Shirley, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know the delay in ransom would bring this to you. They promised me it wouldn't happen." "Wouldn't happen?" "What wouldn't happen?" "They wouldn't hit me?" He could have saved me. I didn't want to remember those things, but someone always made me recall them over and over again. Lucas seemed to already know what I had been through, but all I wanted to know was where Eason had gone. "Do you know where Eason is?" Lucas grabbed my wrist, his tone a mix of force and pleading. "Shirley, forget about him. Let's start over, okay?" Upon hearing this, I lost control, stood up and pushed him away. In the dimly lit room, I bumped my waist into the table edge. "Shirley." I knelt down, just like that day when Lucas came to pick me up in his car. "Mr. Lou, please give Eason back to me. I only have him. I beg you, please." Lucas tried to hug me. "Shirley, you have a wound on your knee. Get up and talk, okay?" I avoided his touch, resisting frantically. "I only have him." "Lucas, are you trying to make me die?" "Don't touch him. I want to die." "I will go and die." Lucas broke down, shaking his head in sorrow. "Shirley, I have never. How could I let you die?" He smashed the flower vase on the table and picked up the shards near his own throat. "Where is Eason?" Lucas was clearly in despair. "Shirley, I really don't know. Please don't hurt yourself." I paused, understanding something. "I see, you don't believe I will go and die. Doctor." Lucas shouted. The doctor and the bodyguard rushed in together. I was restrained, and Lucas took the opportunity to grab the sharp ceramic shards from my hand. A sedative was injected, and I instantly lost all strength and emotions. The private doctors busied themselves bandaging the wounds on Lucas's hands. "I'm fine. Go check on Shirley," Lucas said. "Don't worry, Shirley only has a superficial wound," the doctor replied, simply wrapping a few layers of gauze. "But Shirley's emotional wounds were severe and needed to be treated properly." "I understand, thank After a while, the room was left with just me and Lucas. I lay on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling as if my consciousness was floating outside my body. Seeing me in this state, Lucas almost choked up. "Shirley, please give me a chance to make amends. I will compensate you properly." The sedatives seemed to be effective, calming my turbulent heart, and even the most terrifying memories could be traced back. Compensate? How to compensate? I wondered. Lucas seemed to see a glimmer of hope and eagerly held my hand. I was kidnapped for 3 months. At first, they thought I was valuable and would treat me well, but they would scare me every day. If the ransom didn't come, they would leave me dead in the wilderness. They would throw me half a stale bread every day, which I couldn't eat, and soon enough, I didn't even have that to eat. Later, they called you, telling me to scream louder. What did you say? You said something rude, saying to contact your secretary for anything. After hanging up, one of them kicked me in the stomach, and I fell to the ground with the chair. Gradually, they became more ruthless, realizing that a girl like me wouldn't make a difference. They would beat me every day and use me as an outlet for their anger. I saw Lucas's body start to tremble. Could he not bear this? What would happen next? Then, they couldn't get the money, so they lost patience and started using whips, needles, sticks, and even the curling iron I had in my bag, heating it up and burning it on my skin. With each sentence, Lucas became more and more distraught. He could hardly look at me, yet he feared that I would disappear in the blink of an eye, conflicted and in pain. But I didn't care. Why bother with this pretense? "Shirley, why didn't you wait for me to pick you up? Tell me, I will kill them all." I tilted my head, with a wry smile. The ransom didn't come. They said they would kill me, you know? At that moment, I even thought, I can finally be free. I could see my parents' faces waiting for me, but they told me to live. I found some strength and managed to escape. It was a forest, then farmland, and finally the highway. I slept under a shelter, in the trees, eating leaves and drinking rainwater. If lucky, I could find a garbage dump and eat the same spoiled food they used to give me. After walking for days and nights, covering several kilometers, I returned to you. You told me one thing: "You're dirty." Lucas couldn't bear it any longer and collapsed to the ground, his eyes bloodshot, looking at me with despair. "Shirley, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know about the ransom. I didn't know how you came back." Lucas, can you and Anna experience what I went through? You can't compensate me, but I forgive you. Really? Lucas was incredulous, trembling as he grabbed my hand. "Really, as long as you give me Ethan back." That night, Lucas stood by my bedside for a long time. His eyes were sunken, reflecting the highs and lows. He still claimed he didn't know where Ethan was. I didn't want to talk to him anymore until his phone rang. With a shrug of my blanket, he left the room desolately. I stayed at the Lou Mansion, unable to leave. A psychologist visited my room every day for therapy. She was a beautiful lady who never pressed me about my past but shared interesting stories every day. Eventually, I decided to trust her and opened up to her, asking if she had a lover. She said yes and showed me the ring on her hand, happily mentioning that they were getting married soon. I congratulated her and shared the story of Ethan and me. She seemed relieved. That night, I sat on the bed, staring at the moon for a long time. It occurred to me to check if Ethan had contacted me, but my phone had been confiscated, so I could only watch the moon. As I gazed, I opened the window and jumped out. The hospital smelled of disinfectant, and when I woke up with a headache, I felt like my bones were about to fall apart. Outside the ward, the arguments grew more intense, and I could hear them more clearly now. No wonder Shirley avoided us after she came back. She must have thought we had abandoned her. "Lucas, how could I have raised such a troublemaker like you? How do I face your uncle and aunt now?" "Dad, Mom, I didn't expect this. I just wanted her to behave." A clear slap, followed by a few muffled grunts from Lucas. I thought his uncle must have hit him again, but it wasn't until I heard Aunt's exclamation, "Ethan!" I tried to get out of bed, but ended up falling to the ground. It seemed my leg was broken. The room in the villa was only on the second floor, so jumping from there wouldn't kill a person. Hearing the commotion, Ethan burst in from outside, his face weather-worn, sporting a stubble as if he hadn't shaved in days. "Ethan!" I grabbed a fruit from the bedside and threw it at him. He got hit, but appeared anxious and worried, quickly coming over to pick me up and place me back on the bed. "Mrs. Smith, call the doctor." After a brief checkup, the doctor said, "Don't get out of bed for the next 2 weeks. The wound on your knee is irreversible, and any movement could worsen it." The doctor seemed a bit angry. Ethan hurriedly apologized profusely, promising that it wouldn't happen again. The doctor looked peculiarly at the people surrounding me and said to me, "If you need help or legal assistance, just let me know." After that, he left to check on other patients. It made sense, with my injuries. It was natural for people to think a lot. Eason came over to hug me, looking weathered. I pushed him away. Mrs. Smith then stepped in to embrace me. This time, I didn't resist. Surely, you've suffered, all because of Aunt's incompetence in raising me. I reassured her. It's all in the past. Lucas stood silently in the corner of the hospital room, full of guilt. He probably never expected me to jump from the room, past. Kneel down in front of Shirley. Mr. Smith ordered. Lucas, compliantly, walked over, and I looked to Eason for help. Eason pulled him back up. Shirley can't handle it. Yes, Uncle. The Smiths raised me for so long. This time, I'll return the favor to the Smiths, I said. Mrs. Smith burst into tears upon hearing this and cried even louder. Shirley, are you trying to distance yourself from us? I shook my head, explaining that it wasn't to distance myself from them, but from Lucas, Uncle, Aunt. When I was younger, I caused you trouble unknowingly. My parents are no longer around. Thank you for raising me. You are in my heart, just like my own parents. Uncle couldn't hold back his tears. Coming over to pat my hand, he and Aunt spoke for a while before leaving, asking me to rest and promising to visit me again tomorrow. Lucas stood outside the door, unwilling to leave. Shirley, we are really over, right? When Eason heard this, he wanted to go up and hit him, but I held him back. 7 years is too hard. Lucas, how many 7 years does one have in a lifetime? After being discharged from the hospital, Eason took me to the police station, and with his help, all the criminals who kidnapped me were caught. I heard that after retiring, Eason went to work as a bodyguard for a wealthy family. How did he return to his old profession this time? Haven't you heard? Eason caught the eye of a wealthy family's daughter, and when she was kidnapped, Eason didn't hesitate to fight for love. Someone gossiped. As the person involved, I sat outside on the corridor, eating the dessert Eason bought for me and listening to gossip about myself. Why are you sitting here alone? Where are your family members? I pointed inside the room. Eason came out with a stern face. The 2 police officers stood at attention. Sir. Eason pulled me up from the chair. The officers stared wide-eyed, watching the little sister become the sister-in-law. Why not spread the news? I think it's quite interesting, I said. After Eason retired and participated in this case, which was a public-spirited act, he not only completed the mission but also received a title. He felt a bit embarrassed, as he had some selfish motives. What's there to be embarrassed about? By doing this, you will be recorded in our family history, I reassured him as we walked back home carrying groceries. Does your family have a family history? I asked. Yes, we do. Well, you must write down this matter, or else I'll have to pray to my uncles and aunts tonight. Writing letters is too slow. After Eason returned, he comforted me for a while. When I found out that he had heard about a sudden task from the police, he left without waking me up. I couldn't help but feel scared, he said. It's a good thing there's a week's worth of food in the fridge. He'll be back in a week. But he didn't expect me to go out looking for him, only to be caught and brought back to the villa by Lucas. Before dinner that night, I sat on the couch holding my ID card and checking my phone. In the kitchen, Eason was chopping vegetables and chatting with me loudly. Anna has been arrested, and the court has already filed a lawsuit against her. Lucas is suspected of murder and may also be summoned for questioning. I'll have to write a forgiveness letter when the time comes, at some point. The sound of chopping in the kitchen stopped, and Eason came up behind me, suddenly hugging me. Is this the forgiveness letter? Why not forgive and understand me? I glared at him, and Eason sheepishly apologized. I glanced at the weather forecast. Tomorrow was going to be a good day. Eason found my missing slipper from the bedroom and brought it to me on the couch. Marriage is favorable. I kicked him, saying, tomorrow, bring your ID card and come with me to register for marriage. Eason suddenly stood up, overjoyed like a puppy, and hugged me, rubbing against me. I knew it. You are the best to me. On the day we registered, I deliberately informed Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith and took Eason with a forgiveness letter to have dinner at the Smiths. No, I can only eat a little bit at meals, especially since Eason feels more entitled and scrutinizes me more closely. Mrs. Smith held my hand and asked with a smile, when does Shirley want to have the wedding? Let Auntie know in advance so she can prepare early. Lucas was nowhere to be seen throughout, but as we left the villa, I suddenly felt someone watching me from behind. When I turned around, there was no one there. What's wrong? Eason asked. Nothing. Lucas stood in the darkness, holding a photo frame, almost in tears. Inside was a picture of him with a girl from his youth, the bright and proud Shirley, the Shirley who was once all his, but now can never come back.